Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're diving headfirst into a dark and chilling chapter of American history, the Salem Witch Trials.
A story that continues to fascinate and horrify even centuries later.
Absolutely. We've got some great sources to dig into. Articles from Smithsonian Magazine and the Science Survey, plus information from websites dedicated to Salem's history. Oh, and did I mention the Haunted Happenings Festival?
That's right, because Salem certainly knows how to capitalize on its spooky past.
They do. But we're here for more than just the ghost stories. Our mission is to go beyond the surface, really unpack not just the events themselves, but the WHY.
The social and political forces, the power of fear and accusation, and why this dark period continues to grip our imagination.
So let's transport ourselves back to 1692, Salem Village, present-day Danvers, Massachusetts. This wasn't exactly the picture-perfect New England settlement we often imagine.
Far from it. This was a community under immense strain.
Okay, paint the picture for us. What was going on?
Well, for one, you have refugees from King William's War, a conflict between England and France. And these refugees flooded the village, straining resources.
Got it. So already a sense of unease, competition for limited resources.
Exactly. And then add to that, outbreaks of smallpox.
Oh, no.
Ravaging the population.
This is starting to sound like a recipe for disaster.
It was. And then there were the existing tensions.
Tensions?
Between who?
Between families connected to the wealth of the port and those who relied on agriculture. Different social classes, different ways of life.
A powder keg ready to explode.
You could say that.
And then comes the spark. A group of young girls, Elizabeth Parris, Abigail Williams, and Putnam Jr., begin experiencing these strange and disturbing fits.
Imagine a small, isolated village, shrouded in darkness, and these unsettling sounds echoing through the night.
Creepy. Tell me more about these fits.
They'd scream, contort their bodies, make unusual sounds.
Sounds terrifying. It was. And for these girls, especially in Puritan society, anything outside the norm was quickly attributed to the devil's influence.
So they were under immense pressure to explain what was happening.
Absolutely.
What happened?
Under this intense scrutiny, the girls started pointing fingers.
At who?
Their targets. Tituba.
Who is Tituba?
An enslaved woman owned by the Parris family.
Okay.
Sarah Good.
And who was she?
A homeless beggar.
So already marginalized individual.
Exactly. And lastly, Sarah Osborne.
Tell me about her.
Impoverished, elderly woman.
It's chilling how these initial accusations targeted the most vulnerable in the community.
Isn't it?
These women were easy scapegoats.
Their marginalized status made them convenient targets for the anxieties gripping Salem.
It sends chills down my spine, just thinking about it. And then, as if things couldn't get any worse, Tituba's confession throws fuel on the fire.
Oh, yes.
She describes terrifying imagery. Black dogs, red cats, a tall man with white hair urging her to sign the devil's book.
Imagine being Tituba, an enslaved woman in a completely foreign culture, facing unimaginable pressure to explain the inexplicable.
It's almost impossible to fathom the fear and desperation she must have felt.
It is. And while it's likely this confession was born out of that fear.
Coerced, perhaps?
Possibly. But regardless, this confession had a ripple effect far beyond what anyone could have imagined.
Solidifying the darkest fears of the community.
Breathing life into their nightmares.
And the accusations, they didn't stop there, did they?
Sadly, no.
It's like a virus spreading through Salem.
A virus of fear and paranoia.
And then Martha Corey, a respected church member, becomes a target.
The accusations against Martha Corey were a turning point.
How so?
Questioning a pillar of the community like Martha, it signaled that anyone, regardless of social standing, could be a suspect.
No one was safe.
No one.
And to make matters even worse, even a 4-year-old girl, Sarah Good's daughter, isn't spared.
The very fabric of their society was unraveling.
It's terrifying how quickly fear can twist reason, turning neighbor against neighbor.
The seeds of paranoia had been sown, and they were taking root, growing into something monstrous, something that would consume Salem.
And tragically, as we'll see, this was only the beginning of a nightmare that would stain the pages of history.
The fear that had gripped Salem Village was quickly escalating. It was transforming into something even more sinister.
More sinister? How so? Action.
What do you mean?
A special court was formed to handle the rapidly increasing accusations.
So this wasn't just whispers and paranoia anymore.
No, this was official. The Court of Oyer and Terminer.
And this court, they had the full weight of the law behind them.
Precisely. And on June 10th, 1692,
What happened on June 10th?
the unthinkable. Bridget Bishop,
Who was Bridget Bishop?
an older woman, known for her, well, independent spirit, colorful personality, some might say.
Okay.
She became the first person to be hanged on Gallows Hill.
Hanged.
Yeah,
It's a chilling image to think about.
it is. The darkness of the forest, the crude gallows. The crowd gathered to witness this horrifying spectacle. I can't even imagine what that must have been like for Bridget Bishop. Standing alone, facing those who had condemned her, based on nothing more than fear and superstition.
It's a stark reminder of how easily accusations became convictions in this atmosphere of fear.
The legal system, designed to protect the innocent, was twisted into a tool of persecution.
And what makes it even more terrifying is the court's reliance on something called spectral evidence.
Spectral evidence? What is that?
Imagine being accused because someone claimed they dreamt you were tormenting them.
Dreamed.
Yes.
That's insane.
That was the power of spectral evidence. It was based on dreams, visions, other intangible experiences.
So literally, you could be condemned because of someone else's nightmare.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
And it played directly into the heightened emotional state of the community, legitimized the accuser's fears and fantasies.
Though there is no way to defend yourself against this.
It was incredibly difficult, if not impossible. Even respected figures like Cotton Mather, a prominent minister, saw the inherent danger in this.
What did he say?
He argued, and quite reasonably, that it was better to let 10 suspected witches go free than to convict one innocent person based on such flimsy evidence.
But his warnings went unheeded.
They did.
And the toll of this hysteria was absolutely devastating.
Devastating indeed.
19 men and women were hanged on Gallows Hill.
19 innocent lives extinguished, their names forever etched in this dark chapter of history.
And it wasn't just the hangings, was it?
No.
Giles Corey, the elderly farmer.
Yes.
He was pressed to death with heavy stones for refusing to enter a plea.
Imagine the agony, the weight of those stones slowly crushing the life out of him.
Horrific.
At least 5 more people died in the horrific conditions of the jail.
Their cries for mercy unheard. Their suffering adding to the growing darkness that had enveloped Salem. It's unfathomable how this could happen. How could a community, steeped in the values of reason and justice, descend into such madness?
It's a question that has haunted historians for centuries.
Were there any voices of dissent amidst this chaos?
There were a few brave souls who dared to speak out.
Like who?
Figures like Increase Mather.
Another Mather.
Yes, a prominent minister and the president of Harvard at the time.
Wow.
He began to speak out against the use of spectral evidence and the escalating frenzy of the trials.
What did he argue?
He argued that the court was rushing to judgment, condemning innocent people based on unsubstantiated claims.
It seems like common sense, but I guess common sense doesn't always prevail when fear takes over.
Sadly, you're right.
Was anyone else speaking out against the trials?
Even Governor Phipps, who initially supported the trials, had a change of heart.
What caused his change of heart?
His own wife was questioned as a possible witch.
Wow, talk about a wake-up call.
He eventually prohibited further arrests and dissolved the court of Oyer and Terminer, bringing a halt to the trials.
So even those in power weren't immune to the suspicion that had permeated Salem. But was this a genuine shift in public opinion, or were they reacting to the political fallout?
That's the question, isn't it? Was it genuine remorse or self-preservation?
It's a chilling thought that it might have been more about saving their own skins than a true reckoning with the injustice they had inflicted. But what about the aftermath? Did Salem ever truly confront the horror of what had happened?
There were attempts at reconciliation, though they were far from perfect.
What kind of attempts?
Some of those involved in the trials, like Judge Samuel Sewell, publicly confessed their guilt, sought forgiveness for their actions.
That's something, at least.
But it took centuries for the Massachusetts General Court to formally apologize for the events of 1692.
Centuries.
Yes. And that didn't happen until 1957.
Wow.
And even more shocking, one accused woman, Elizabeth Johnson Jr., wasn't officially exonerated until 2022.
That's unbelievable. Justice delayed for over 3 centuries. It makes you wonder about the lasting scars this left.
The trauma of the Salem Witch Trials reverberated through generations.
The fear, the betrayal, the deep sense of injustice. Those are wounds that don't easily heal.
No, they don't.
What I find particularly interesting is how this story, despite its horrors, continues to captivate us centuries later.
It's a story that continues to fascinate and horrify.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's because the Salem Witch Trials tap into something primal within us, a fear of the unknown, of the darkness that lies just beyond the edges of our understanding.
It's like a ghost story that has haunted the American psyche for centuries.
Exactly.
And we see this fascination reflected in so many ways.
We do.
Arthur Miller's play, The Crucible, for example,
Using the trials as an allegory for the McCarthyist witch hunts of the 1950s.
highlighting the dangers of mass hysteria and political persecution,
Exactly.
and the ongoing scholarly debates about the causes of the trials.
Ergot poisoning, repressed sexual desires, power dynamics within the community.
Seems like everyone has a theory.
And these debates reflect our continued fascination with trying to understand the darkness that gripped Salem,
And then there's modern Salem itself,
a city that has, in a sense, reclaimed its history.
though not without controversy.
Right.
You have memorials and museums dedicated to the victims.
Attempting to shed light on the tragic events and honor those who suffered,
And of course, there's the annual Haunted Happenings Festival.
which draws huge crowds every October.
That's a strange mix, isn't it?
It is a complex mix of remembrance, tourism, and commercialization.
It raises questions about how we remember and commemorate such dark chapters in our history.
How we balance respect for the victims with our fascination with the macabre.
It's like we're simultaneously drawn to the darkness
Yeah,
and trying to find the light within it.
precisely. And that brings us to a crucial question. What stands out to you about this enduring fascination?
I think it's the human drama at the heart of it all. The fear, the paranoia, the betrayal. It's a stark reminder of how easily we can succumb to irrationality, especially when fueled by social pressure.
You're right.
We see ourselves reflected in the accusers, the accused, those who stood by and did nothing. It forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our own capacity for cruelty and injustice. Yeah, it's a chilling reminder that the darkness that descended on Salem is not so different from the darkness that can reside within us all.
Exactly. The Salem Witch Trials, they really serve as a stark warning, a reminder of what can happen when fear and suspicion run rampant, when reason is abandoned and justice is perverted.
So are we saying that something like the Salem Witch Trials could happen again in our modern world?
I wouldn't say it's impossible. Think about it. The spread of misinformation, the scapegoating of minorities, the ways in which fear and anger can be manipulated for political gain.
It's true, all echoes of the same forces that led to the tragedy in Salem.
Yeah.
That's a sobering thought. Like, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. But how do we guard against it? How do we prevent history from repeating itself?
Well, it starts with awareness. By understanding the historical context, the social and psychological factors that contributed to the Salem witch trials, we can better recognize the warning signs in our own time.
So knowledge is power.
Exactly.
But what else can we do?
Critical thinking is essential. We must question assumptions, demand evidence, and resist the urge to jump to conclusions.
Right. It's so easy to get swept up in a tide of fear and anger, especially when it's fueled by, charismatic leaders or powerful narratives.
Yeah, but we have to resist that pull.
It's about having the courage to stand up and say, wait a minute, let's take a step back and look at the facts.
Precisely. And it's also about cultivating empathy. You see, the Salem witch trials were fueled by a lack of empathy, a willingness to believe the worst about others, to see them as different, dangerous, as less than human.
We have to remember that at the heart of this tragedy were real people, men, women, and even children, whose lives were destroyed by fear, suspicion, and ignorance.
The Salem witch trials are a stark reminder of the fragility of justice, the power of fear, and the importance of reason, empathy, and courage in the face of darkness.
It's a lot to think about. As we conclude this deep dive, I'm left with a profound sense of unease, but also a glimmer of hope. The darkness of Salem serves as a warning, but it also illuminates the importance of fighting for justice, for reason, for humanity.
Yeah, we began this deep dive seeking to understand not just what happened in Salem, but WHY. We've explored the historical context, the social and political pressures, the power of fear and accusation. We've seen how quickly a community can descend into madness, how easily justice can be perverted. But we've also seen the courage of those who dare to speak out against injustice, the resilience of the human spirit, and the importance of learning from the mistakes of the past.
The Salem Witch Trials may be a story from the past, but its lessons are timeless and urgent. It's a story that demands we confront our own capacity for darkness, that we remain vigilant against the forces of fear and division, and that we strive to be a force for reason, justice, and compassion in the world.
We encourage you to delve deeper into the sources we've explored. Read the testimonies of those accused and learn more about the historical context. And most importantly, reflect on what this chilling chapter of history means to you.
Thank you for joining us on this harrowing journey into the heart of darkness. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the light of reason burning bright.